My name's Amber Massey, and welcome to Africa Defined. So this week on Africa Defined, I wanted to just give the very basic information about the African continent. So if you're wanting to know just the very simplest, basic things that you need to know, here it is. The first thing about the African continent a lot of people don't know is it is made up of 54 countries. Now, of those 54 countries, 6 of them are island nations. The newest country to the African continent is South Sudan, which gained their independence from the country of Sudan in July of 2011. Another cool aspect about the African continent is it's made up of thousands of cultures, and these cultures speak thousands of languages. So it's much more than just someone is African. There's actually so many culture groups and so many languages. Africa is actually one of the most, if not the most, linguistically diverse continents in the world. Now, the largest country on the African continent is Algeria. And it is so big, in fact, the state of Texas could fit inside of it 3 times. Seychelles, an island nation of Africa, is the smallest country considered on the African continent. The Gambia is actually the smallest country on the continent of Africa, and it could fit inside the state of Tennessee 10 times. Now, speaking of the size of the continent of Africa, it's still really big, not according to some maps that we may see. The continent of Africa is actually the second largest continent in the world, just behind Asia. It actually takes up about 6% of the globe's surface, about 20% of its land surface. Now, Africa also has the second largest in population, again, just behind Asia. Africa contains about 16% of the world's population. Africa's population currently stands at about 1.2 billion people. Nigeria is the most populous country with about 200 million people. Now, it is a scientific fact, at least so far, that Eastern Africa is the origin of the human race. So you're talking about roughly in the Horn of Africa, which is around the country of Ethiopia. Those are where the oldest human remains have been found. Slavery had a huge impact on the African continent. First of all, roughly 30 million Africans were taken away from Africa and dispersed, of course, all over the world. The first major slave trade was the Arab slave trade that took place starting around the 7th century all the way up until the 20th century. That trade alone took about 18 million. Then the transatlantic slave, which most of us are aware of, happened a little bit later from the 15th to 19th centuries, and it took about 7 to 12 million people. Now, during the late 1800s and 1900s, something called the Scramble for Africa, or the colonization of Africa by European powers, took place. And around 1870, about less than 5% of the continent had been taken over by European powers. However, by 1914, 90% of the continent was ruled by European powers. I personally consider Liberia to still have been colonized. It just wasn't colonized by Europe, but it was colonized per se by Americans, American free blacks, and those also coming from the Caribbean and even South America, went to Liberia in order to have a new life, a better life than what was afforded to them in the United States. However, at the same time, they colonized the indigenous peoples that were in the area of Liberia. So even though they were not colonized by Europe, they were still colonized by the Americans. So thank you for watching. I hope that helps. I hope you gained a little bit of information. Next week, I will be putting up a video talking about a lot of the myths and dispelling myths about the African continent. So if you liked this video, please give me a big thumbs up below. I've added my website down in the comments. Please take a look. I will also have a free ebook talking about the things that I talked about today, 54 countries, 6 island nations.